Forum Borealis. Paradigm Expansion.
Greetings from the north and welcome to a new forum conversation, this time with world-leading scholar on Esoterica, Tobias Churton. He was educated at Oxford University, is a faculty lecturer at Exeter University, and was the brains behind the curriculum of their esoteric studies, sponsored by recently deceased Professor Dr. Goodrick Clark. Churton worked for many years as the right-hand scholar to the Dutch bibliophile industrialist Joost Ritman of the Ritmans Library. He's worked as a producer and filmmaker for many years, doing documentaries and TV programs for BBC, Channel 4, Border TV and others. He's a best-selling author who's done both fiction and non-fiction and poetry. He's a composer, musician, lecturer and former magazine editor. Churton has authored 19 books for the open market and is best known for his research into Western esotericism, in particular such hermetic streams as Gnosticism, alchemy, Rosicrucianism, Freemasonry and Christian mysticism, and has published gold standard biographies on such people as William Blake, Georgy Gurdjieff, Aleister Crowley, Elias Ashmole, and John Theophilus de Saint-Gelliers. Today we speak with him to cast light upon aspects of our series from King Solomon to Arcadia, where the Rosicrucian movement is an important backdrop to understand the big picture of this mystery. Tobias helps us better grasp the context of the Rosicrucian Manifestos, who could have been behind, what they sought to achieve, how it was received, what it led to, and what relations this had to other movements of the time. As a detour, we also converse about the sexual aspects of ancient Gnosticism. Welcome to Forum Borealis, Tobias.
Pleasure to be here, Al.
And it's such an honor to have you with us. Now, I must confess that I discovered you through the works of Peter Amundsen and his research.
Oh, really? I mean,
yes.
A couple of weeks ago, we had a really nice lunch.
Oh, because I saw his first TV series on his discovery, where you were interviewed.
Yeah.
So I did a little research on you, and it dawned upon me that you're one of the leading figures in the fields of scholarly esoterics.
Yes.
You're based in Exeter, right?
If lecturing Exeter, yes, but I don't live in Exeter, for what it's worth. Nor do I live in the invisible house of the Holy Spirit most of the time.
Really? That's disappointing.
I know. I try to pay a visit occasionally. You know.
That's good. That's good. Now, speaking of universities, you did study theology at Oxford, isn't that right?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah, about when was this?
1978, I went up to Oxford, and I graduated in 1981. I was cast out into the harsh world.
Right.
To make my way.
Well, I'm asking because one of our pet guests here, he got his doctorate degree at Oxford, and I think it was in around the same time period. You never met an American called Joseph Farrell when you were lurking around in Oxford?
No, I didn't know one single person who was interested in esoteric history. Absolutely no one. When I went to Oxford, I was offered the chance, instead of doing a paper, as they called it, I could do a dissertation. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to do magic and the Old Testament. And I was told within a week that there was no tutor at Oxford who could mark such a paper, such a dissertation. There was no one authoritative enough. I was told it hadn't been studied since the 1890s.
Wow.
And I think they were talking about Fraser, J.G. Fraser's Golden Bough. And that was very upsetting for me because I thought going to Oxford I was going to expand my mind. And I ended up having to spend huge amounts of time studying the patristic, the church fathers and all this sort of thing, which I did like a good boy. And dull and boring as it was, I always felt that I was only allowed one side of the picture. And I was aware intuitively and through intimation that there was another story that I desperately wanted to get near. And it wasn't until my third year that I found a book in Pusey House Library called The Occult Philosophy in the Renaissance, which was a little book, one of the last books of Francis Yates. And that was a delight. And it came right at the end of my course, so I had no way of bringing it into my official studies at that point.
Francis Yates, of course, is this famous scholar on esoterics.
Yeah, she was a pioneer, and she made many great errors, but she had she had great writing style and was a hell of a personality. But she was she was a one-man band or one-woman band. She didn't develop, as they say, fail not of an heir. She didn't produce progeny. She wanted her books to be, her books were her children, and everyone knows that the Giordano Bruno book is a wonderful book, and it's upset historians of sciences since it was published in 1964. It still annoys them hugely. And in England particularly, if you advance the view that magic was a component of scientific revolution, you will not be invited for dinner.
Yeah, they still have this paradigmatic blockage.
It's incredible how, like the Vatican, the Royal Society, the scientific establishment has become the new Vatican. And they don't torture you on a rack. They ignore you.
And discourage your academic career.
Yeah, and there's an Anglo-American axis to this, because the Americans tend to follow, in certain aspects, in academic matters, a British lead. And the British lead has been, for a long time now, quite hostile to Hermetic philosophy.
And still, you guys are managing to get this out as a subject within the system. You can actually study these things.
I'm suffering from it. I said, I'm a kind of dissident because the university doesn't want an esoteric subject being taught. There are real enemies of this subject in Great Britain.
But haven't you managed to get esotericism out there as an official... you can now be a bachelor in esoterics, a master in esoterics, etc.?
Not since Nicholas Goodrick Clark died, no.
Really?
No.
So it's going back?
Yeah, I'm afraid so.
Wow. I didn't know that.
No, it's amazing. We have, the popular culture in this country is anti-intellectual. There aren't many English scholars specializing in this field. The only ones were Christopher Mackintosh, who now lives in Germany, and Nick Goodrick Clark didn't actually specialize in the subject, but he was very interested in it. He actually was a fundraiser.
Wow.
He raised funds to set up things in universities.
Oh.
So in terms of British talent in this field, very little. After Francis Yates died in the early 80s, I mean, she really founded the idea.
Yeah, but what about Dr. He lives in, he teaches in Colgate right now. What's his name again?
Jocelyn Godwin?
Yes, Godwin.
Well, he's American, isn't he, really? I mean, I think of him as an American source.
Right.
Even Solzhenitsyn was known, I feel in a way like a dissident.
Great.
In the intellectual world of my country.
Well, if you weren't, you probably wouldn't have that much to bring to the table. Because in this day and age, if you're not a dissident, you're not a deep thinker.
Oh, nicely.
That's my claim.
Thanks, Al. I feel a lot better now.
Well, it's so funny because there is this chap that we've interviewed many times, Joseph Farrell, and he studied patristics in the same time period at Oxford as you did. So it's good to see Oxford has produced at least two great heads from that time period.
You're too kind. You're too kind, Al. Too kind. It was a very difficult period to emerge in. Looking back, it seems Neanderthal, it seems incredible. The theology in my college at Brasenose, where Elias Ashmole was a member of Brasenose College, I found out later.
Wow.
The chaplain there was an Anglo-Catholic bigot who simply did not, he simply had no concept of a spiritual religion that was respectable outside of the Catholic concept. And today that seems extraordinary to me, but at the time it was normal.
So they had true believers as teachers.
I wasn't allowed to read the gospel in the chapel because he found out that I was interested in Aleister Crowley. Yeah, I can tell you there were moves to get...
That didn't hurt your degrees? One should expect them to punish you.
Well, I was given what were called penal collections. This won't be of much interest to your academic listeners, but because we've all been through this rubbish anyway. But I was given penal collections. In Oxford, that means they set us a pass mark, that you're not told what it is. And if you don't meet that pass mark on an instant examination, it's not the official examinations, it's a punitive examination. If you don't meet this pass mark, you're sent out of the college.
Wow.
Now, when I read about Johann Valentin Andrea being kicked out of Tubingen because he wrote a rude poem about one of the tutor's wives, in around 1605, yeah. I shook his hand because, it's very difficult for the free spirit to operate within academic concept.
Yeah. Professor Goodwin, he wrote an article once that I think should have been much more widespread. I think it's called Priests, Professors and Gurus, where he kind of blows the lid on today's academicians.
It's nice to know you're not alone when you hear these things.
Yeah. There is a handful of you.
The problem has always been one of isolation.
Yeah, I guess. But he argues that there's basically two types of teachers. There is the Saturnian types, which are these strict dogma people, and then there's the Hermetic types, which kind of makes stuff come alive.
Colourful.
Right?
We're colourful.
Yeah.
Yes, your first lot, they think that they've got the pure white light.
Right.
And if you want the pure white light, you have to go through the spectrum of the colours first.
Good point.
If you're not happy with colourful thinking, don't think you're going to reach the white light. That's my view.
Very, very well put. Fortunately for our listeners then, we picked the right guy to brief us upon a very important topic. I mentioned that I discovered you through Amundsen's work, and we've been covering that in depth here. To give people in general who maybe have not good enough knowledge about the background of Peter's research, you are the perfect guest, because we cannot go a meter in this area without encountering the Rosicrucians. So we are going to try to make visible these invisibles. And this talk with you today is based upon your book on the subject, which, as far as I've managed to discover, has two titles. One is called Invisibles, the True History of the Rosicrucians, and the other one is called The Invisible History of the Rosicrucians. Is this the same book? What's the fuss here?
Yeah, I wanted to call it Invisibles, not The Invisibles. There's a difference, but Lewis Masonic published it, and I said it's not about the invisibles like it's the aliens. It's invisibles in the sense that you would say imponderables.
Right.
It's dealing with this whole concept of invisible forces.
Yeah.
But the American title, which they insisted on, The Invisible History of the Rosicrucians, yeah, that's okay. I don't mind that.
No, but it reminds me a little of Paul Foster Kay's title. I think he has something similar.
Of what?
The True and Invisible. Yeah, The True and Invisible History of the Rosicrucians. I think it's his book.
Is that what he called it?
I think so.
Is that what he called it? I did
check it. Yeah, I think so.
I've read that book. Yeah, no, it's just Paul Foster Case's imagination. There's no history in it.
Well, it's basically tarot, isn't it?
Yeah. But anyway, I think the second one, which I did for American publisher, is better served with footnotes, with endnotes, and I had time to revise it. So I think the second one, The Invisible History of the Rosicrucians, is the text to have. It's also better illustrated.
That's the Inner Traditions publication, right?
Yes, I think that's the better book, the better version of the book. That's just my view. You know. What inspires.
Yeah, right. But well, people can take a sneak peek at your quality if they check out the movie called The True Story of the Rosicrucians. I saw that, and not only do you go into very meticulous details, but you're also painting a very beautiful aesthetic picture that makes the movie very easy to follow. So for anyone who want to check out Churton's work, maybe you should start with that to see the depths of his take on the Rosicrucians. And it's also illustrated with beautiful tunes. Oh. Is that Debussy, that beautiful music in the background, the piano?
It's the La Cathédrale Engloutie. Right. I mean, it's just the most Gnostic. I do a whole chapter on that in my book about Erik Satie and Debussy.
Nice.
Yeah, and some of my own music in this film too.
You're making music too?
Yes. How can you not, poetry?
Yeah, your old classmate that I mentioned, Farrell, he plays the harpsichord. What's your instrument?
Guitar, keyboards. Today gives you everything.
And you compose?
Yes, I compose, absolutely.
Cool.
I've just finished an album.
Great.
I've just done the music for a William Blake movie we're trying to get made about William Blake, and I've recorded and orchestrated all that. Yeah, it's just one art, poetry, painting, and music, the three powers in man for conversing with paradise, which the flood did not sweep away. Those are William Blake's words. You can't, if you're in touch with what he called the poetic genius, which is the spiritual inspiration of the higher mind, you cannot avoid expressing it.
Right.
In the classical ways. So you're naturally driven to image making and music, and of course prose and poetry. Poetry above all, really.
Yeah, I guess if you're infatuated with one of the muses, remember the others are her sisters, so it's a very short step from one muse to another.
It's a very crowded bed.
Oh, speaking of that, you just have a book out on the sexual aspects of the Gnostics. Now, we will lobby to get you on later to give us a full account of that in relation to a series we're going to have on sacred sexuality. But would you very briefly now, before we begin on the Rosicrucians, pitch that book for us, to us?
It came out in September, and it's called Gnostic Mysteries of Sex. That's the American title. I wanted to call it something else, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah, that matters. That's funny. What would you want to call it?
I want to call it the Sex Gnostics.
Yeah, well,
never mind the bollocks.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yes. And it started because the publisher asked me. I said, "What would you like me to write about?" I was feeling generous. He said, "I'd like a book on Barbelo." Barbelo, the Gnostic archangel or goddess who's identified with Sophia, the wisdom. So I said, yeah, that's a good idea. Nobody's really done this. Nobody's identified Barbelo as a figure properly. So that was the basis of the book. And in the process, I thought, well, it's time somebody unraveled this maze, this spaghetti of Gnostic doctrines, and actually show how the different groups operated and how they differed, and really try and sort that thing out. And so the book is really, looking at it now, I would say if you're going to study what's called Gnosticism, start here, because you'll get the authentic spermatic gnosis, which many of the books today tend to follow a kind of liberal feminist line, and they've diluted the Gnostic challenge to a very great degree. I've just tried to restore it to its explicit content. Yeah, it's the difference between a kind of Disney romance and Last Tango in Paris. This is the Last Tango in Paris of Gnostic books.
This one is, okay.
Well, that's it.
Right. So we've had already a program. It's not out yet, but we had a program on the Gnostics. But I'd like to interview you on the sexual aspects here about sacred sexuality, tantra.
Yeah, well, one of the problems, this is right, because one of the problems with the modern scholarship since post-Elaine Pagels on Gnosticism is the sexual material has been completely ignored. You know, there are a couple of scholars. April de Koninck is very good on it. But the fact of the matter is what the world has been presented with is the soft Hermetic Valentinian gnosis.
The vested version.
Well, but they've got it totally wrong. They still think they're talking about spiritual philosophy in the Platonic sense.
Yeah.
But, you know, the Gospel of Thomas, for example, which is written about as if it's a nice, Johannine, mystical, nice, Gnostic.
Exactly.
All that stuff about, you know, the kingdom of heaven is spread out upon the earth, but men do not see it. Oh, it's lovely. But the fact of the matter is it is a deeply heretical book. Not because it contradicts the creeds, but because it's actually talking, but you've got to know the key, and it's very simple key. It's talking about spermatic gnosis. It's talking about sexual substances as the containers of the logos.
That's so interesting.
That's what it's actually writing about.
Huh. I guess it gives a little physical aspect to the chemical wedding also.
Well, if you like, you know, but it's a long way from Johann Valentin Andrea, you know, which presumably we will talk about today.
Yeah, but I'm getting to the, you know, making love with Sophia aspect. It may have ended up as symbolism, but...
you have the very strange thing that the man who invented the Rosicrucian mythology dissociated himself with the interpretation of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll ask you about that. Oh, I have to say one more thing. Peter Levenda, the historian, he just came out with a book where he illustrates actually that Thomas Vaughan's book on alchemy can be decoded with the help of Tantra. And he gives the key actually in that book. I haven't read it myself yet, and I'm going to interview him on that as well as read it. But may be of interest to you since you're writing on this.
Have you seen my sex Gnostic book?
I saw it like 50 minutes before we talked when I went through your book.
Right. Because there's a whole chapter on Tantra in it.
Right, so that's why we need you on later for this. I'll give you a few months, and I have so many guests, and I can't read up on everyone, but I'm going to buy the book because that's a very fresh take. I think it's the first one I've seen on the market, actually.
Yeah, it's the only one. Yeah. And I go into it in detail, and it's a detailed read, and somebody said it's really for scholars. Well, no, it's for the intelligent layman, but I looked at it recently, and I thought there's some really the stuff that you don't have to be a scholar to get the power of this. But I insist on dealing with everything. I did want to sort the whole area out, and I also identify Barbelo, which no one's ever done before, which is a exciting trip. So you know, it's all there. You want to know the Gnostics were very into sex. You know, I mean, it's. Take that out, and you're not talking about Gnostics.
But we're talking both, you know, in the East you have the same thing in aspects of Hinduism, but here we're talking actually both physically and metaphorically.
No, actually I think the Kundalini concept and the Tantra actually are from Gnostic teachers. In date terms, the Gnostics are first.
Yeah.
I found texts nobody had realized in Hippolytus, which are descriptions in detail of sexual magic. But Hippolytus and the fathers thought they were reading philosophy. They just didn't get it's there.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm serious. I mean, that was a revelation. That was one of the revelations.
Right.
No, they were being specific. It wasn't metaphor. They were talking about practices.
You know? That's huge.
Yeah.
Because everybody credits that to Tao and Tantric traditions.
It's pre-Tantric. The first Tantric writings, the earliest of the 16th century.
Yeah, what you're saying is huge. This needs to be get known out there because, first of all, it leads credence to a guy you've been writing about, the Royce Crowley take on Gnosis. Yeah. But even bigger than that is that when I look at the ancient times and I see the Pythagorean stream that and Apollonius of Tyana and all these people, it's like a non-sexual aspect. It's like something is lost there. But would you say that they belonged to this current, or that they were an anti-current or an alternative current to the sexual gnosis? Well, what I call the Pythagoreans, but that would include Platonics, Neo-Pythagoreans, Neoplatonics, everyone in the tradition of Parmenides, Pythagoras, Empedocles, Apollonius of Tyana, all these people. Because I can see sexual aspects in the teachings if you look for the metaphor, but there's so much which is lost. So I'm starting to wonder if there really was a sexual tradition all the way up to when the Christians were hijacked and they purged that. Or if there were two parallel traditions prior to Christianity, one with an emphasis on the sexual aspects and one that were more Puritan. What do you think?
Yeah, it's a very, very difficult question on the basis of the evidence. I think with the Gnostic tradition, you have got evidence. Interestingly, my contention in the book is that the best evidence for the sexual gnosis is actually given by their enemies, not opposing it, but actually accidentally. That they reveal to anyone who knows about the subject that they didn't understand the traditions they were confronted. They did to a certain extent. Tertullian was smart. He was a lawyer. He understood there was a strong sexual component. Irenaeus is a little bit blind. Hippolytus is almost completely blind to what he's describing. And it's quite obvious that you can present a sexual spiritual doctrine in mythological terms. Now, if we're going to go back before that to the pre-Socratics, like you're suggesting, Parmenides, I don't know as we have sufficient. If a sexual gnosis was an esoteric tradition in pre-Socratic times, then they wouldn't have been writing about it.
Exactly. Because
this is one of the most dangerous doctrines that you can know. And this is what it's fascinating. I mean, it's clear to me that Simon Magus, for example, was probably an adept of sexual magic.
But he lived at the same time as Apollonius and Jesus.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, who's to say they weren't also?
Yeah, that's what I'm starting to think now.
But the problem is do you want to prove it? You can't. These were, it's like when I've been writing about Gurdjieff. It's absolutely crystal clear to me that Gurdjieff was a Freemason. Of what group? I don't know. I would hazard a guess that it was something like the ancient and primitive rite.
Well, what about the Bektashi? Don't you think he was?
Of course, absolutely. I make that point. Yeah, and the Bektashi were already describing a lodge as a path in Turkish, the very use of the word. And the Naqshbandi Sufis also tie in completely. And
the Druze, I'm sure.
Yeah, Gurdjieff, a bit like Aleister Crowley, is very anti-theosophy. He's anti-spiritualism, but he never says a word against Freemasonry or Rosicrucianism. This is a very major point.
Good point.
And because all the books on Gurdjieff have been written by Gurdjieffians, with one exception, and that's not anyway.
And his own autobiography.
Well, that's not an autobiography. It's a gospel.
But he's not a Gurdjieffan. He is Gurdjieff.
He's Gurdjieff, and if you read that as you should read the Gospels, i.e., it is spiritual story with some history lurking in the background, you're all right. If you think it's history, you're an idiot, because it wasn't written to be history. But
and he claimed to be in touch with the ancient Gnostic traditions, didn't he?
No, he never uses the word Gnostic, ever, not once.
He doesn't. Interesting. Well, he says Christian, old original Christian traditions.
He uses the word Essene.
Essene, yes, that's it.
He knows about this stuff. But he's a Mason. I'm strongly convinced that, of course, to be a Russian-speaking person in his period of his development, which is the 1890s, it was illegal to be a Mason in Russia until 1906. And he kept with it. He, like so many Masons of those days, he just didn't tell that he was a Mason. You just didn't.
But there were Martinists in the court of the...
Of course there were. Pappus was there.
Yeah, they could be called Masons. So.
Well, they weren't. Yeah, and there were lodges in St. Petersburg. Oh no, this is not an issue. But it wasn't. It wasn't something you were allowed to write about.
Okay.
Okay, but after 1906, you could write about it until the revolution. So there was a sort of brief period. It was an 11-year period. And, of course, most of that was the First World War anyway. But anyway, the point being is esoteric traditions are esoteric for a reason. They are esoteric. One of the reasons we're fascinated is because it is secret, and you've got to use your imagination. And this is the danger. Some people's imagination is too imaginative.
Yeah, but I'm glad we killed some myths today. You seem to be worried about the myth among neo-esotericians, but I'm more worried about the conspiracy branding of everything esoteric. It's like it's a reaction going on.
You're right. And I'd be happy to address that subject also any time you like. Yeah, you're right, of course.
Yeah, so we've had a little excursion now, but before we go, well, you could say that what we talked about is relevant to the Rosicrucians. In fact, it all entangles into each other. Rosicrucians, Masonry, Martinism, and it's also reckoned to be descendants. They all descend from the Gnostics anyway, one of the descendants. But before we go to the classical Rosicrucians then, what about the other Gnostic books you've written then?
Well, there was the original book I did was the book of the TV series Gnostics.
Okay.
That came out in 1987, and that seems to have an immense influence on people, even though it's one of my simplest books, but it was also my first. Maybe that's advantage. That has had a huge effect. Then I did also Gnostic philosophy.
Yeah, that's the one I was thinking of. Yeah.
That's a much more reasoned book, in the sense that there's considerably more detail, and its expanse is much broader, and a lot of things are explained, like Sufism, Kabbalah, how these relate to the Gnostic tradition. Aleister Crowley, Jimi Hendrix, John Lennon, all this whole concept of deviant spiritual thought I brought that together and show its unity. So if you have these feelings or intuitions, you can look at this and say, well, I'm part of the church hasn't got it all. The Catholic, the mainstream church doesn't have the monopoly on spiritual history. We have a spiritual history, and it goes right back, And that was the purpose of that book. Then I did a book on the Gospel of Judas, which was because that came out in 2006 when the Gospel of Judas was first published, and an Italian publisher wanted a popular quick book. What is this Gospel of Judas? Is it going to bring down the Vatican? So, and that was published in Italian, first of all. So there's that one as well.
And your Rosicrucian book, you just said it was called The Invisibles, and that's now due for a French translation?
It's being translated into French as we speak, and I'm thrilled about that, because you know how hermetically sealed French literary culture is. Yeah. They would deny this, I dare say, but anyway, they generally think, well, if there's a subject, there must be a Frenchman who's written on it. So we don't need roast beef. We don't need the roast beef to write about these things. We have our, fair enough. Yeah. But here's the credit. Somebody out there in France has actually said, well, this is actually a book that French people must know about, and I'm extremely touched and grateful that a leading French Freemason has decided to translate the Rosicrucian book, because many Freemasons want to know what are the facts behind the Masonic Rosicrucian relationship.
Yeah.
And they're right to want to know because it's a fascinating story.
Yeah, and there's so much myth going around.
I made it my desire a long time ago to... My ancestor, Ralph Churton, who was a cleric in the 18th century, said the only thing worth contending for is the truth. And I make that the basis of all my work. I always think the truth is not only stranger than fiction, but considerably more exciting. So I strip away.
Oh yeah, totally agree. Yeah, I would also remind people of Blavatsky's famous adage: "There is no religion higher than truth." So I guess we're in the same church, huh?
Yeah, she was amazing. Yeah, she said great things like that, and yet contributed hugely to the myth.
Oh yeah. Well, that's the paradox of human beings, I guess.
Yes, I think theosophy actually has a lot to answer for.
They do, but all diss them, and I often catch myself being the devil's lawyer.
Never diss Blavatsky herself. It's always the same with these things. It's always the followers,
Yeah.
She was an original, adventurous, omnivorous mind, and she was highly creative and courageous. And we must love Helena Blavatskaya. I mean, she only got that dreadful name because she made a bad marriage to an Armenian diplomat. But she had a fantastic family, great connections, very interesting story, wonderful woman. In a way, it's a pity she got mixed up with the whole Indian thing, I think. But that's had a very good effect as well. I mean, can we imagine George Harrison without Madame Blavatsky? Would there have been George Harrison? Would there have been all those Beatle interest in transcendental subjects, which has had it's all down to Blavatsky.
Yeah, but could we imagine any renaissance in the field of spirituality after Theosophy if it wasn't for that? I mean, she really broke in the doors, didn't she? Crack the consensus.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. We have the gift of perspective.
Yeah.
But
exactly.
She had a tremendously positive effect. But I think Theosophy as a movement, especially because it tied itself very closely early on to what they call spiritualism, has also, created a kind of a barrel of new misformed snakes of various kinds. And yet, of course, out of that comes, originality and individualism. So, yeah. Perhaps I'm a bit purist.
We'll
I always
see.
like to drink when it's first poured. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I like it, from the fountain.
Yeah. Well, there's nothing shameful with quality, huh?
Yeah.
Now, before we start on the Rosicrucians, just one more question about your video series. Is that simply a reading from your book, or is it a particular adaptation for that film?
What, the little film I did on the true story, you mean?
Yeah.
That was a sort of independent piece. It's a long story to this, and I don't want to... It'd be boring, I think. I originally, back in 1989-90, a Dutch Rosicrucian enthusiast and library founder, Joost Ritman.
Oh, the Ritman Library. Yeah.
Yes, I worked with him for some years. From 1986, and I was kind of the house filmmaker, and he wanted a film on the Rosicrucians to go with an exhibition that he was planning, and all sorts of terrible things happened to his business around the time I was supposed to get going, so the whole thing it all got shelved.
Yeah, and taken over by the state, right?
Yeah, it was a disaster, it was really catastrophic and had quite a big effect. You see, because by working with Ritman, I'd actually scuttled my chances in British television because there was a lot of jealousy. I was working for the Dutch millionaire. So, British TV is, well, I won't go into it now, but my whole thing was use television, to its highest ability. Which was quixotic in retrospect, but there was a chance in the 80s because there was a new channel, Channel 4, which had an intellectual purity about it to begin with. But of course, as with all these things, the enemy moves in.
It degenerated pretty quickly.
It degenerates, yeah. Absolutely right. But anyway, I was on the golden age of that. I was there at the beautiful point. Anyway, he wanted to film the Rosicrucian. It never got made. And I hate not finishing a project. And for years and years, I wanted to do this thing. Then I was running a magazine for the Freemasons of Great Britain, United Grand Lodge, called Freemasonry Today, and somebody wanted we did a series on the Rosicrucians, and when I wrote those articles and I went to Germany to make photographs, I thought, well, these articles actually are a nice basis for a rather clear film. Rather than trying to tell the entire story of the Rosicrucians, which is hugely complex and could fill 20 volumes easily, I thought, well, by doing it as a journalistic exercise, it gave me a framework. And then I then made the film myself just in my room in Lichfield where I was living. And we put it out, and Lewis Masonic published it. And no TV people would take it, of course, in Britain. So it was just for people who were really interested. That's how that particular production came out. It was just a question of I wanted to do it.
So when did it come out?
That came out in about 2002, I think.
And your book?
The book came out in 2008. The book specifically on the Rosicrucians.
Yes.
That came out in 2008. It was very strange. In the 90s, you couldn't get anything done. And then suddenly I left the Freemasons magazine, and because my daughter was born, and I took this John Lennon attitude, you should be a house husband. I felt that. And I left the business of making a living, and I played house husband very seriously. And then, of course, it doesn't work. And I then, how did I get, and I started writing. And that's when my writing I'd written 3 books before, but suddenly in 2002 I started writing, and since then I haven't stopped. And I've been trying to make up for the 10 lost years in the 90s, nearly 10 years that I consider lost.
Yeah, you're very productive. But you also have another movies. You made one. Yeah. You made one also on the Gnostics. You made a movie on them too.
Right. Well, in '87, I did the Gnostics TV series for Channel 4, and that was a best-selling book in England. That was number 2 bestseller in England. But after that, there was a reaction in television, which has a lot of political aspects to it. And the 90s for me were an incredibly difficult period. I'd reached the top of my profession in television, and I worked with a guy called John Ranelagh, who was head of Danish Channel 2. He was the program commissioner. And he and I worked together in television for about 5 years after Channel 4 started. And when he left Channel 4, the whole thing went kaput. And Margaret Thatcher had set up a thing called the Broadcasting Act of 1990.
Oh, my God.
And that removed the requirement that independent television companies should make religious programs. Well, that meant you could only work for the BBC on religion. And the BBC is, to put it, appallingly conservative.
Yeah, especially now after Blair.
Yeah, and it's appalling. It's impossible. They're liberal left politically, and they're not interested in esoteric, Gnostic things. They regard it as elitist. That horrible word, elitist. And it's not, they have decided it's not popular material. And yet Da Vinci Code comes out and becomes the biggest selling book in the world. Yeah. But they don't want that to happen, so they pretend it hasn't happened.
Yeah, even, was it Henry Lincoln? I think he worked for BBC, one of those guys.
That was back in the 60s. Yeah. And in the early 70s, you still had a few I used to work for the BBC. Myself, I worked for BBC Religious Television in 1985. And there were still a few brains then, and they've all gone.
Yeah.
So what you've got is this bizarre situation that the subject was popularized at the very time when the establishment media decided it wasn't politically interesting.
Exactly. But then came internet to your rescue, I guess.
in a way that, the internet in a way, because of course the internet gives an access to this whole. But I mean, the internet is a double-edged sword, as you know. Yeah. So it's also given access to Muslim fundamentalism.
Yeah, Nazism, anything.
Or anything.
But it is what it is.
You're now introduced to the complete sewer of humanity.
Yeah, but I mean, it goes from the seventh depth of hell to the seventh depth of heaven, I'd say.
Yeah, well said, Alvin. I like.
If you know what to look for, that is. Now, I have to say that we started this as a hobby this summer, our webcast, and we were amazed of the reception because we're focusing on obscure subjects, but our pitch is...
So-called obscure, yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah. It will become mainstream. But we have three things that I think others don't have. We do it in a light mode. We're not just sitting around complaining in negative energy. We're having laughs. We're happy about it. We're going into depths, which is why we have you on, because we need someone who can deliver substance, right?
Thank you.
And we see that our viewership has, it just blew what we expected. It's up to 200,000 now. And that's just since the summer. So we expect this webcast to become pretty popular when we have been around for a while. So.
Right.
Yeah, so these shows that we're having, and the good thing with the internet that you won't see in TV is that when we record a show with you now, even if it's just 5,000 people tuning in for the next couple of months, if you go for the next couple of years, it may be 50,000 people, because it doesn't go away, right?
Sure.
It just spreads and it spreads and it spreads. So I think this is the future. The so-called alternative media is going to outlive and actually be the death of traditional media. And it serves them well, if you ask me.
Oh, yes. I mean, it's hopeless. Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, so now let's stop beating around the bush and get to the main topic. I ought to add, if people go to our presentation of you at our website, they'll find links to all your books and your movies and your website and all that. It's not out yet, but it's going to come. So they can check it out for themselves.
Yeah, I've just finished my 19th commission book.
Wow. What's the latest one on?
It's a biography of Gurdjieff.
Ah, interesting. Yeah. Wow, looking really forward to that.
It's called Gurdjieff, the Biography.
Okay.
A modest title.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, we'll see. I'll be the judge of that, I think, as the reader.
Yes, you have that privilege.
But today, we've...
we're Rosicrucian.
Yes, let's try that. Now, for most people, it's a very famous word, and it even was back in the day. So they pop up at some time. Let's just start from there. How on earth did this obscure group emerge in Europe?
Well, it was a reactionary movement. It was reacting to two things. First of all, the illegal publication of a manuscript called the Fama Fraternitatis, or the Fame of the Fraternity, which had been in circulation by hand among interested parties since 1610. And then a man took it to Kassel and had it printed by Wilhelm Wessel in Kassel in 1614, and the timing of it was extraordinary, and it was an explosion. When it was read, huge numbers of people wanted to either identify with the story that was in this document or claim to be the Fraternity of the Rose Cross. Now, that's the first reaction was to the document, and then, of course, you've got all the people reacting to the conditions of early 17th century Europe. And early 17th century Europe at this point is about to explode into the 30 Years' War, where all the tension and misery of the Lutheran period suddenly explodes in acts of hideous violence and hatred. And all the hidden tensions of the Reformation become manifest in blood. And there isn't a nation in Europe that isn't affected by that. And that disquiet, that powder keg affects many, many minds. And what the Rosicrucian story in The Farmer was saying was, we are on the verge, if we want it, of a golden age of learning. But we must learn from our mistakes. We must read the signs in the heavens, and we must rediscover that purity of free knowledge which God has given us, and stop thinking in terms of entrenched private obsessions, whether they're national obsessions or university obsessions. And so it paints a picture of a world where knowledge is shared for the common good, because God wills it so. So it's also saying that, most importantly, the hidden message is that the Reformation was a failure because it failed to redeem the heart of Europe. There were some nice doctrines. Luther had something to say about St. Paul and Augustine, which correctly challenged the pretensions of the Roman political system. But in terms of a Christian Reformation, it in fact had replaced papism with Caesaro-papism. And in Germany, the German states, and in Sweden, the monarchs and princes had become the heads of the church, and in England as well. And this was not a Christian solution to the challenge of the time. So it was a document which touched on the political, social, and religious sensitivities of the time with an extraordinary promise. And it was regarded as a dangerous revolutionary tract, and it's no accident that the word manifesto has been attached to the three documents published between 1614 and 1616, which are most associated with the movement. They're called manifestos with consciousness that, of course, there was a communist manifesto. In other words, they have become regarded as incendiary tracts. And the question I pose in my book, one of the many questions, is, was that their intention?
Good question. But you say three docs. I count the General Reformation as one of them. So wouldn't that make four?
No, I think that's just a publisher's. I think the publisher threw that in.
Okay. So you don't regard that as a part of the real Rosicrucian publication?
No, I think it was part of the. In fact, of course, it was part of the problem, because in 1614, when The Farmer was published with Boccalini's On the Reformation of the Whole Wide World, which was a satirical piece by Traiano Boccalini, which was basically, if you read it, which I have, is advocating that reformation of the whole wide world is a quixotic impossibility, because people are too stupid and too earthbound and too materialistic ever to know what's good for them. At the end of the great conclave to decide the future of humanity, if you know the story, so it is decided that they're going to lower the price of vegetables, at which there is widespread rejoicing. And that's the cynicism which informs the Boccalini's Venetian tract on the Reformation. But because the title was On the Reformation of the Whole Wide World, and it appeared on the same title page of the 1614 document, people thought the Farmer Fraternitatis was itself the leading advocate of the reformation of the whole wide world. And while the Farmer was, because the main author of the Farmer was interested in the spiritual reformation, which was really a medieval idea, that the church should be spiritually renewed, this idea then became an incendiary and revolutionary one. And so you then had people within the first generation who wanted a worldwide revolution, and you have proto-Illuminati who were trying to form, really wanted violent revolution. And so the Farmer attracted the extremists very quickly, which is why its primary author, Johann Valentin Andrea, withdrew from it, because he he didn't want it published in print. That was never his intention. And it was a document to stimulate and for discussion and to see what was going on, whether people would be attracted to his essential ideas. But it got completely out of hand.
Yeah,
and
you can say that.
Has now created a religion.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no question that do you remember the Woody Allen film? What is it? Annie Hall. And Woody Allen goes to a concert. He thinks he's going to a concert. It turns out he's going to see a guru with a reporter from Rolling Stone. And she says, I'm a Rosicrucian myself, meaning presumably she was met. And Woody Allen says, I can't subscribe to a religion that advertises in popular mechanics.
I think that's...
Now that's what happens to Andrea's great vision of 1610.
Yeah.
By 1977 has become that.
No secret he was referring to Amok most probably.
Well, of course it would be Amok, because Amok sold itself as a hobby. You could buy the hobby kit, as you know, Al.
Yeah. But you seem to take for granted here that Andrea was the real author of even all the manifestos, it seems, not just the chemical... Well, let's start with the manifestos. You said the fame of the Brotherhood. What's the second and third?
The Farmer is the first publication. In 1615, it was republished in Frankfurt with the Confessio Fraternitatis, the Confession of the Fraternity. Now, the authorship of that document, a very large part of it is taken from the writings of an extraordinary and most extraordinarily lovable man called Tobias Hess. I don't say that just because he has my name. Tobias Hess was a Tubingen doctor of jurisprudence. He was a doctor of medicine. He was a Paracelsian, which meant he was regarded with suspicion. He was a Paracelsian medic.
Yeah.
And he was a theologian of enormous depth and Christian sincerity in all the best senses. And he was the greatest inspiration for Andrea. So he's probably the main inspirer of the figure of Christian Rosenkreuz, or Frater CR, as we must call him at this point, because we only get the name Christian Rosenkreuz from the title of the Chemical Wedding, which Andrea publishes himself, I think, in 1616 through Zetzner of Strasbourg.
And that's a separate publication to
It's completely separate and, of course, different inside. But I think the reason Andrea has it published, I'm sure he was involved with the publication, was to say, look, this was only meant to be an allegory, a story. You've taken it literally, you fools. And by taking it literally, you miss the essence of it. And history subsequently, unfortunately, has taken that road. Everything that comes in this world is distorted. And The Farmer is one of the most distorted books on earth. It's fascinating if you work in this field. There are people for whom the literal truth of The Farmer is as significant as the literal meaning of the Bible.
You'll find that all over anyway, on all areas.
Yeah, but it's kind of, what it's done is to remove the subject from academic seriousness so that historians generally are ignorant of these things and therefore they cannot assess correctly very important movements in the 17th century because they are pre-prejudiced. Pre-prejudiced. I know that's a double meaning of pre, but it's they're pre-prejudiced against esoteric material.
Pre-biased, we could say then.
Yeah, if you like. Yeah, they're pre-biased against it.
Okay, but you mentioned Tubingen, and I read, Tobias, that around the court of Tubingen, some 20 or 30 years, don't arrest me on the details here, but considerable time before the publications of the manifestos, that there was this play script that had attached to it one of the drafts of what became the manifestos, and this was at a time period when Andrea was a child. Do you know anything about this?
No, I don't. Never heard of it.
Okay, because I wish I could provide you with some concrete info here, because this is one of the reasons that I, for many years, have been a bit skeptical to ascribing everything to Andrea, just carte blanche. And he did, of course, deny authorship, but that means nothing. I mean, he would have done that anyway.
Yeah.
And indeed, your title of it is Invisible. So a clue here is that they didn't want to be, like, if you identified as a Rosicrucian, you were not a true Rosicrucian.
Yeah. The idea was that if you wanted to respond to this movement, then you were supposed to write to the fraternity. But there was never clear how you could do that. And we see this problem in the life of Adam Hasselmayr and Augustus von Anhalt, who was an important Protestant prince in northern Germany. He wanted to know who this Augustus von Anhalt, who based at Plutzkau near Halle in Germany, and he wanted to know who these people were. He was totally transfixed by the first manifesto. He wanted to, and he'd read it before it was published, and he'd been shown him by a Tyrolean doctor and Paracelsian enthusiast called Adam Hasselmayr, who was a notary public to the Archduke Maximilian of the Tyrol. And he wanted to know who they were and could he find them, and he wanted to publish more of their works, because the first work said that they had a follow-up work called Their Confession, which would explain in 37 rules what they really stood for. And we get this feeling very early on that membership of this group was something difficult to handle. You couldn't claim to be a member because the members were basically unknown. They were only referred to by their initials. And again, this whole problem, and how do you take this document? Is it an allegory? Is it a fact? What is it? There's no doubt that if you read the original Farmer, you're dealing with a text that purports to come from a genuine group of people, and that you are called to answer it. You're summoned to respond to this call. And people did. And the way they did it was by publishing pamphlets. And these pamphlets either said, yes, I'm with you, which is pretty well what I think Andrea wanted. People say, yes, I'm with this idea. Or they purported to generally explain what the idea was. That wasn't such a good idea. Or they were hostile and said, no, these people are wicked. Right. These are Rosicrucian witches. They're trying to distort the life of the Western world. It's a subversive work, which is very interesting. Yeah. So you have this for and against thing, and you have a paper war that starts. The idea of whether you could claim, I don't know how many, I think any claim that people made to be part of the Brotherhood was with a certain amount of irony. I don't think anyone... I'm trying to think. I think there were some writings where people claimed that they were Rosicrucians themselves. They were part of this fraternity. But generally speaking, people say they were in sympathy with it. Some would claim to know. Some would know who was behind it. They say, I know who these people are. And the hostile people would say that. But it was very quickly grasped that the material had originally come from Tubingen. And that was the information given to Augustus von Anhalt.
But where were they published first time? Was that in Germany?
They were published in Kassel. For
the first time?
Yeah, by under the publisher worked for Moritz von Hessen, who was the Landgraf of Kassel.
But it didn't take a long time before they were published in France and England and Italy too.
Oh, almost immediately.
Almost immediately.
Yeah. After 1614. But the manuscript had been circulating in 1610, 4 years earlier. Had been circulating, we know, because Adam Hasselmayr had a copy. And we know I think there are about 3 manuscript copies which are before the publication. Right. I think there's 2 in London that I can think of, and I think there's another one in Germany that Andrea's friend Besold had. But
that would be the 2 first manifestos, right? The third was made later?
Yeah, it's not a manifesto, the third one. No. You can interpret somebody published it. He'd written it, we know from his own writings, Andrea. Andrea definitely wrote the Chemische Hochzeit, the chemical wedding. He wrote it in 1606. That is written. We have the manuscript evidence. Now, whether the document that came out as the Chemische Hochzeit in 1616 was identical to his original manuscript of 10 years earlier, we don't know. He might have changed it. He might have developed it. Somebody else might have rewritten it. We don't know. But we can definitely identify that document as the work of the young Andrea in 1606. And it's a romantic work. It's an alchemical work. Andrea's mother practiced alchemy. She was she made medicines in Tubingen, and his great interest was medicine. And this whole idea of healing, the Christian. Yeah. We forget this idea today. It's because our health service in the Western world has been completely taken over by the state, by medical authorities. We forget that in the 17th century, many of the major doctors were also clergy, and healing came from the church, not just spiritual healing.
Well, we can go back to the original healers.
Yeah, but this is a terribly important thing, because there are two factors about the Rosicrucian Manifestos that are constantly forgotten in the excitement about esoteric meaning. But the fact is, the two major interests of the original Rosicrucian writings, one is medicine and the other is mechanics, technology.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's really what they're interested in. And, we just don't get that. We don't realize that in those days, all true healing was a form of miracle. When people were healed, when they actually saw a doctor and survived, it was a bloody miracle, to actually survive.
Yeah, but doesn't Michael Myers' book on the laws of the Rosicrucians, doesn't that say explicit that they are gathering to cure the sick gratis?
Yes, but even though it's plain and clear, people don't understand the importance of that. It was a critical idea. It's the healing idea is one of the most central points about it. And this is where the Rosicrucians the document is so important, because what Andrea was saying was, look, if a man is cured, does he care whether he's cured by Galen, the official founder of Western medicine, or by Paracelsus, the heretic? If a man's cured, it's like the Shakespeare play, "A rose by any other name was smell as sweet." Yeah. If Paracelsus' spiritual ideas, crazy as they may be, cure the man, then it's as important as if you followed the book. Right. And this is the whole liberation idea that Andrea is saying. Says, let us go with the facts. Let us go with experience. Let's go with universal truth. Let's not prejudice and say, you cannot cure. It's a bit like the Bible when it says, Jesus was accused of curing people on the Sabbath. And the Jews who were his opponents got very upset because he cured on the Sabbath, which meant work. It didn't matter to them that the man lived. It mattered the day he lived. Yeah. And this is the kind of mentality that this is the true Christianity that Andrea is trying to say. The true Christian must be concerned with absolute truth. This is what Christianity stands for. And he made this very clear in all his subsequent works. If you want to know what the farmer means, you've got to read Andrea's works that were published after it, because they illuminate the meaning. Unfortunately, the esoteric movement isn't interested in the Christian theology of Andrea. It's interested in the excitement of a secret body of adepts working for the reformation of the world in secret.
Yeah, the conspiracy.
Yeah, that's what still gets them all excited today. I mean, the real Andrea, the real Rosicrucian story is, you could say, is about what his friend, Andrea's friend, Christoph Bezold, called the virtue of the simplest simplicity. That is the spirit of it. If you're not interested in the virtue of the simplest simplicity, you are going to miss it. You can say, oh, yeah, but I know, but what about the astral body? Or what about my, where's my spirit going? Oh, for goodness sake, it's nothing to do with that. The farmer is a desperate plea for truth in the face of ignorance. And you would think that every academic body in Europe would embrace the farmer as a kind of founding document of a new world, but they don't.
No.
And this makes me wonder that maybe Andrea was right. That the universities are no less political than the filthiest political party, group, or convention.
Or religion.
Or anything where people get together and give each other dignified names. I'm Prime Minister, I'm President, I'm Chancellor of the Exchequer, I'm bloody who am I? I'm the Pope.
I see where Andrea went wrong. He should have invented fancy hats to put on. Then it would be accepted.
He didn't have to. It was done for him. And eventually you end up in the 18th century with the Golden Rosenkreuz, with a Masonic concept of hierarchy. So that experiments in alchemy, which could have healed people, were interrupted by German. No, you have not sent your alchemical theory to the Oberhauptdirektor. In 2 years' time, we'll decide whether you can continue. Right. I mean, you've got to read Renko Gefhardt's book on Neo-Rosicrucians in the 18th century. It's hilarious. Because you see then the corruption of the idea. And pretty well that's what we've seen since. So I'm personally very excited about the purity and goodness of Andrea. And if you don't understand that, your concept of Rosicrucianism will be lost in theosophical complexities which aren't worth the attention other than for historical reasons, clarity, if you like.
Is his other books as available today on the general market?
No, of course not. Of course not.
Okay.
I mean, that's the whole irony of the thing. Is his greatest book on truth. It's on the subject of truth. It's called Christian Mythologies. Has never been translated from the Latin into English or modern language. But the farmer you can get, in Argentina, Brazil, you name it. Yes, the fantasy of Andrea is embraced, but the truth is not. And all modern Rosicrucian organizations are children of the false interpretation of Andrea. It's a tragedy, but when you think about it and you think about how religions develop and the nature of the human psyche, it's no surprise that you haven't heard the true story.
Fascinating. I'd say that your home country was in a terrible state under Elizabeth. People were suffering big time. And there was this totalitarianism under Elizabeth that fortunately changed a little around King James.
Well, I don't know if that's a fair picture.
Well, you paint it then.
Well, no, because it was often called the Golden Age of Elizabeth. And when James I came to the throne in 1603, while some people were very excited, particularly foreign people.
Catholics.
There was a Protestant excitement because he had been raised a Protestant, whereas Elizabeth she wasn't Protestant theologically, she was head of the Church of England, but she had a tolerant view. Her ministers were constantly pushing her into intolerant actions. She was eventually, against her will, she said, made to sign the death warrant of Mary, Queen of Scots, who was James I's mother. But the fact is, she was never happy with that. She said, "I do not have a window into a man's soul." In other words, it's not for the state to inquire as to the salvation of the individual. It's the job of the country is to erect a Christian ideal that all men can follow. But she was persuaded that the Catholic Church was so politically active that she would have to arrest priests and so on. But people look back on Elizabeth's period, and of course it's all relative. They look back on the Elizabethan age, especially in James's reign, as a golden age, because the reign of James was extraordinarily difficult and troubled, and James was a very unreliable king. Nobody knew what he really wanted, because while he started his reign with a strong image of uniting the Protestant princes of the north, Sweden, Denmark, Germany, the German princes, against the Counter-Reformation, the fact was he was also thinking about marrying his his second eldest son, Charles, who eventually became king, to a Spanish princess. In other words, he thought he could play both sides.
Yeah. Interesting.
And that created a lot of problems. And it's why you have things like Michael Meyer coming over in 1612 and sending him a card saying, may you support the Rose.
Oh.
Now, the Rose was a nickname for his daughter Elizabeth, who had married the Elector of the Palatine, Frederick.
Right.
So they were trying to encourage James to persist with the union of Protestant princes, because it was felt at the time that the Catholic armies would at some point unite and try to destroy the Protestant Reformation. Now that's the context in which the manifestos appeared.
Exactly, right. Hey, just a little footnote, but do you think Francis Bacon was the illegitimate son of Elizabeth? You've heard that claim?
No, that's a new one. I thought I'd heard everything.
Really? That's a new one?
Yeah, that's a new one to me.
Wow, okay, well.
I've never heard that one. I think it'd been difficult to find the time.
Right. What about the gunpowder plot? What's your take on that?
Well, I follow the general view that it was a Catholic reaction to the idea that under James, many Catholics thought that they were going to come under increasing pressure. That was in the early part of the reign, 1605, the gunpowder plot. Yeah. So he hadn't even been in power for 2 years in England. It was Catholic despair, wasn't it? It was an extreme Catholic despair. We've got to remember that the Catholic Church at that time were promoting what we would now call terrorist actions. The Catholic Church issued what the Muslims would call a fatwa against Elizabeth. They said, in other words, they said it is the duty of every Catholic to deprive this woman of her power, i.e. her life. And Catholics were actually given absolution by the Vatican if they killed her. That is a fact. And it's amazing in the light of that fact that James could tolerate he was interested in an irenic solution to the whole, but he thought he could please all sides, and for reasons of his own. It's a very complex matter.
But he was brought up in Scotland, wasn't he?
Yes, he was.
Don't you think he may have had some proto-Masonic influence then on him, which may explain his views? Well,
the divine weeks and works. He had a Hermetic. I think elements of his education were Hermetic. He was familiar with William Shaw, who was head of Scotland's Masons. But Masonry in Scotland, and it was never called Freemasonry in Scotland in this period.
No.
That is critical. The Mason organization, I think all the stories in Masonic circles in the 17th century say that he was an honorary Mason. Is his name in a lodge in Scotland? No, it isn't. To become an honorary Mason that period, all you had to do was employ Masons. So the fact that he had Masons working for him, run at that time by William Shaw, would have made him an honorary Mason. And I'm sure he would have been very happy to have been elevated to some status within what was effectively a small guild system in Scotland. But the difference between Masonry in Scotland and Freemasonry as it develops is a huge gulf. All the evidence for speculative or symbolic Freemasonry is primarily English evidence. But having said that, there's very little of it.
But obviously, alchemists have been associated to the Rosicrucians, and alchemists themselves had this tradition of not publishing their name but remaining anonymous. Often they just call themselves philosophers. So we see also that there were...
Well, because it was illegal, It was actually illegal to be an alchemist.
Yeah, and we understand from just what little you've shared with us now on the political climate of the time, how loaded it was with intrigues. Everything was dangerous. You could get your head chopped off. And even Bacon himself got in trouble multiple times.
Well, to put it to the audience who are listening, let's put it like this. If we say every time we say alchemist, read nuclear physicist.
Right.
You'll get the idea.
Good comparison. So if we look at some of the famous people around, isn't it true then that there was a few Hermeticists with influence on different royal courts? I'm thinking of not just Francis Bacon versus Elizabeth and James, but also John Dee, and you can take it from there.
Well, you'd have to name names. John Dee was not terribly interested in practicing alchemy.
But they were Hermeticists, both of them.
They were certainly, Bacon, he was aware of the literature. He was sympathetic, but it's very interesting that William Blake, who's really a Gnostic philosopher, self-made, when he studied Bacon, he regarded Bacon as one of the materialists. Actually, if you read Advancement of Learning and the Novum Organum and Silva Silvarum, the key texts of Bacon, he thought that the macrocosm-microcosm idea was vastly overrated and had been taken, as he said, to extremes. I don't think Bacon was a great philosopher, but he had a great knowledge of philosophy. Do you know what I mean?
And he was a great scientist.
No, I don't think so.
Really? You're killing a huge myth then. Let's hear it.
All these myths want killing. Bacon was only, like all these figures, he got used after his death as a figurehead. And Newton the same. Newton in British ideology and history is supposed to be the founder of modern science, unless you want Bacon as your founder of modern science. How many founders of modern science are there?
Pythagoras.
Yeah.
My claim is Pythagoras.
Who are these founders of modern science? And then what is modern science?
Right.
Well, modern science is what 19th century materialists, scientists, wanted to believe was true. But these people in the 17th century had very many, as I've studied, they've had many divergent views. And the complexity of those views today means nothing to us. So we use these simple, like schoolboy ideas of what is modern science, what isn't. And you have historians of science say, well, the importance of experiment. But John Dee was one of the first advocates of what he called experience-based scientists. And by experience, he meant you had to see it, practice it, and do it before you needed to believe it. But of course, as he wrote that, he was also full of inherited beliefs. But he loved Roger Bacon because Roger Bacon was a practical scientist. I often think some of the references to Bacon at the period are actually referring to Roger. Francis. Because Roger Bacon was regarded by 1623 in Paris as one of the Rosicrucian Brotherhood. Not Francis. This is very much later. It's because Francis Bacon published a book, or rather after his death, New Atlantis in 1627. But New Atlantis is using the farmer, but he's using it for Bacon's priorities. And a complete jackanapes called John Hayden, he was a charlatan, wrote a book in the 1650s called Voyage to the Land of the Rosicrucians, and he completely mixed up. He mixed up New Atlantis with the farmer and created this myth of the Rosicrucians, one of the creators of the myth in England. So, what I'm trying to say is go to the original. After that, it becomes crazy. Rosicrucianism by 1660 in England means crazy, left-wing, fantasist, change the world at any cost, revolutionary lunacy, Oliver Cromwell, Republican, all of that. It's become that in England. In Sweden, they were executing people for Rosicrucianism by that period.
Right.
This movement is much more interesting and complex than, you're getting your standard Michael Bagent type books, paperbacks. Common knowledge of this doesn't cover it at all. It's hugely more varied. What we're witnessing in the 17th century is the birth of a new religion.
A New Age religion.
The religion of the New Age, yes, which will go through incredible changes. It will emerge as theosophy in the 19th century. It will become something else in the 1960s, and it will keep going on because what it actually is, of course, it's all children of the Gnosis. It's the wayward, wild children of Sophia. Yeah.
But isn't it inherent in Gnosis itself that it's doomed to be like that, because you don't have a totalitarian structure? It is all about your own approach to the divine. So it's kind of, I think it's kind of implicit in the system that it will go all ways.
Yes, it's
all different ways. I mean, you see even the darkest side in Nazism.
Yeah, well, no, I don't think you see it in Nazism at all.
But, interesting.
I think that's one of the most dangerous. There are areas where you can know. That's not.
So the Nazism is a reaction to the Gnosis, then? It's a hijacking of.
Well, the record of the Nazi Party with regard to the Gnostic movements of Germany was entirely and without any exceptions totally repressive. They arrested Freemasons. They burnt down the Goetheanum of Rudolf Steiner.
Oh yeah. But their SS cult stole from those beliefs to create its own dark version. Wouldn't you say that?
I wouldn't. No, I don't know. You're ascribing creativity to the SS. I don't think there's any creativity.
Well, no, it's theft. I'm ascribing theft to them.
Well, whatever fantasies may have passed through Heinrich Himmler's mind, if you want to go there.
Yeah.
Do you think black uniforms and standing around Wavelsburg pretending to be a Grail Knight? You think that's Rosicrucianism? Come off it.
No, it's a disguise. It's a theater.
No. The Rosicrucian in Nazi Germany was somebody who had to keep it very quiet.
Yeah. Yeah, they killed off people who identified with those things.
Yeah, of course, look, you can't accept the will of a Führer, if you're looking for God's will.
Okay, it was just an example anyway, but what I was getting at was that they perverted.
Well, but it's serious today, because people pick up the stuff on the internet and they one symbol leads to another.
Right. Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
And before you know where you are, you've got massacres in Oslo. People claiming to be New Templars and stuff.
Yeah, it's this completely lack of critical thought and source criticism.
Well, yeah, but it's a lack of knowledge. Our children at school are not taught esoteric history at any point, and yet it's now a very important field.
But I think this is nothing new. This is, one of the reasons why Nazis, the SS cult could take symbols and dresses up as their own created version of history or of tradition.
Well, they were following. Remember that the real inspiration for Heinrich Himmler was not Rosicrucian; it was the Catholic Church.
Yeah, good
He was
point.
trying to produce an alternative to Catholicism, and we know that the Catholic Church has tried to take elements from the Rosicrucian tradition. I mean, they even have their own Masonic orders and so forth.
You're referring to the Jesuits?
Well, the Jesuits, I wasn't referring to Jesuits, actually.
Okay.
No, I was thinking of things like the Order of St. Columba and their own sort of masonry groups. But also there were attempts made in the 17th century to come up with a Catholic Rose Cross organization.
Yeah?
I mean, they saw something was going on, we better have our version.
Right.
So there was a spot, you had that. And of course, a lot of the neo-Rosicrucianism was highly Catholic in Austria.
Yeah, that's ironic, isn't it?
It is, and it is and it isn't sort of thing. I mean, Andrea himself was much more friendly towards the Catholic Church. He had friends in the seminaries. And he wanted a unity of Christian people in Europe. He regarded the Reformation as a disaster, which is a unique position, yes. I think historically, I think they're very arguably true. He believed the Reformation would in fact lead to the annihilation of Christianity in Western Europe.
But he was identified as a Protestant, right?
By whom?
Well, historians, I guess. When you read about it...
He is not a Protestant. He is sympathetic to the radical Reformation. Schwenkfeld, Weigel, Paracelsus. He's sympathetic, but he is not at all. He's certainly not... He was a Lutheran clergyman, but it would have been wonderful to spend an afternoon with him.
Right.
And I think you'll have found that... You remember Luther also retained a great deal of Catholic doctrine.
Yeah.
No, I think Andrea was one of the good men who longed for the unity of the church, but a church that was truly tolerant.
Right.
He understood that it was not the right of the church to dictate doctrine in detail. The church must bear witness to the simple. The church, as he saw it, was started by simple men, uneducated men, unsophisticated. They were not logically sophisticated theologians. They were not inquisitors. He saw the spirit of the church essentially as one of divine love. And next to divine love, you have divine wisdom. And if we aspire to a higher wisdom and a higher sense of love and truth, we will be closer to the spirit of Jesus. This Jesus mihi omnia is the principle of the Rosicrucian Manifesto, which is avoided by sort of neo-pagan Rosicrucians, which we've seen, since the 19th century particularly.
But it sounds to me then that we are dealing with something which is much closer to the Gnostics then.
Well, only close insofar as some of the Gnostics were close to the Christian spirit. Now, what is the Christian spirit? Well, you've got to, if you want to know what the Christian spirit is, you're asking the question, who is my neighbor? And look at the story of the Good Samaritan, and you'll get the idea. It is the practice in love of the healing love of God. And that is what the whole concept was about. That's what it was about. It wasn't advocating any particular philosophy. It was saying, look, you're rejecting Paracelsus. You're advocating a neo-Aristotelian concept of religion. This is all false. We're not in the position to judge the wisdom of God. We must attain to it. We are not above it. So a dependence on divine mind. You can see in all this there's a hermetic feeling, a universalist feeling that the universe is crying out for the recognition of its divine origin, and that we must seek ultimate unity. We must seek ultimate truth. This is all part of what Andrea is saying. We must put aside our differences. We must share. And he's up against a political...
Everyone.
He's up against the world. I mean, of course. But that is what a Christian is. If a Christian is not contra mundum, he is not walking in the path of Christ. And the Rosicrucian movement is a Christian movement at root and source. It was never intended to go in the direction of pure esotericism that it has taken. In fact, I would say no, not pure esotericism. I would say impure esotericism. It's a corrupted source. But, it's also for many the beginning. It's the first step. It's certainly superior to the kind of religious education children are getting at schools today, which strikes me as being non-spiritual, and where it's got anything going for it, it's ethical, but basically it's a politically convenient form of religion.
Okay, but let's leave the neo-Rosicrucian perspective now, because we're not that interested in that anyway. I want to go to the roots here, and I take it that you reject, do you reject the notion that there may have been some kind of formally or informally group or circle, maybe around Andrea or in Europe, that can be referred to as the people behind the Rosicrucian idea or manifestos or...
Well, yes, but those are two different things. To say that there is an association of interest, which is promoting ideas, which the allegory...
Like a network.
Well, there was obviously a network.
Let's hear it.
It wasn't very extensive. I have the feeling that Andrea and Tobias Hess were looking for connections. I think it was an exploratory, a bit like the voyages of discovery had sent ships out to find the Northwest Passage, had sent ships to what we now call America. I think, they had this idea that we must find out who our friends are. We're stuck in Tubingen. We know a bit about what's going on in Ulm. We know a bit about Kassel. I've got some friends in Sweden. We have a friend in Venice, Wilhelm Wenzel and Tobias Adami, were two Germans with Venetian contacts, and they were talking to people in Tubingen about what was going on in Venice, which at the time the papacy was trying to destroy the independence of Venice. It was an exploratory operation. It was to find out really, in a way, who our friends are. And is there anybody out there? Is there anybody out there? Yeah. Is there anybody listening to this new message? This new message, which is that if we put right the fracture of the Reformation, is there anyone who understands how this can be done through the sphere of knowledge? It is a university movement. There's no doubt of it. It's a lot of Andrea's work is aimed at the corruption, not only of the church, well, we know all about that, Luther had made that clear, but it's about the corruption of the new 17th century Caesaro-Papist states, or quasi-states of Germany particularly. Mm-hmm. The role of princes in deciding what is true. Right. Very worrying. Thomas More had his head chopped off in England for saying that the king might not be the man who can decide truth. Mm-hmm. This is the issue. One of the fundamental is the authority. Where does authority lie?
So it's political and religious at the same time.
Well, it's in those days it is inseparable.
Yeah,
cannot possibly. The politia is meant to be a reflection on earth of the divine economy in heaven.
Above, so below, then.
Yes, of course, yes. I mean, otherwise, of course, the claim of kings to be infallible, frankly, or divinely guided, or the divine right of kings, is only based on this idea that monarchy in heaven must be represented by monarchy on earth. All that happens in the Reformation is that monarchy is removed from Rome and put in Paris, London, Stockholm, you name it,
But, okay, what about other people who's traditionally associated with this then, like Michael Meyer, like John Dee?
Yeah, well, Dee has been called a sort of proto-Rosicrucian, but only by post-Rosicrucians. Right. Nobody thought so at his time, He's interesting because he was an Irenicist. He was very interested in the Catholic, with a rapprochement with Catholic theology. This was of great interest to him. He knew, like so many of the really brains of the period who weren't bigoted, he knew that the Reformation was a catastrophe. He knew that even though the Inquisition was disgraceful, even though the Pope was in the pocket of the Habsburgs, even though Spain behaved like they were God Almighty on earth and so on, but he knew that the principle of the Reformation, of the Lutheran Reformation and the Calvinist Reformation, had just created a sectarian, narrow-minded, bigoted, new church that were effectively and politically as oppressive as what they were allegedly against. It was a bit like, if you can imagine the Russian Revolution, the Democrat, Kerensky, the Democrats.
Yeah, social democrats.
They're saying, well, did we get rid of the Tsar so we could have Lenin? And this was the realization of the more sensitive and intelligent people, was post-Reformation Europe was practically more unpleasant than pre-Reformation Europe, in practical terms.
So careful what you ask for.
Well, yeah. The system might be corrupt, but it might, I think even William Blake said there was probably more practical freedom for individuals, as long as you don't challenge the system. This is the important thing. If you don't challenge the system, there's probably more practical freedom under a papal autocracy than under a Protestant one.
Yeah, we saw this with the revolutions too.
Yeah.
It ate its children, as it's saying. So
inevitably, because power is what is in a revolution. All that happens is power is moved from one place to another. The problem is power.
Yeah, the structures.
If you can have a revolutionary government that actually isn't interested in power, well, of course, it's not going to last very long.
No, good point.
Because without power you can do nothing. So the more true the authority, the less able it is to practice authority. Look at Europe today. Look at the utter legless, spineless nature of it. And you can see the problem. They're neither pope nor peasant. They don't know what they are. They say they're Democrats, but they won't. Which people do they vote? Whose vote are they interested in? It's catastrophic.
Yeah, history repeats itself, no doubt.
Well, we're living in this age, and we're talking about Rosicrucianism. The ideals of Rosicrucianism are very much relevant, or I wouldn't have spent or arguably wasted my life on this subject. What Andrea was talking about is as important today as it was in the early 17th century. He was talking about a universal fact of human nature and the nature of God and the soul. That's what these issues address, and it's timeless. The reason you wouldn't be asking me these questions if there wasn't something in it. And it isn't just a historical discussion about the 30 Years' War. We're talking about where are we going as human beings?
No, your point is very well taken, and you have really made a case for that. But still, there is all these loose ends that we have to address. Then, even if you're coming back to this original point. And at this point, I think we should take a break.
Okay.
And when we come back in part 2, we're going to explore deeper the Rosicrucian current, the philosophy behind it all, the manifestos, their purpose, and the usual suspects, the central figures, people associated with or who may be behind the involved in the Rosicrucian current. We're going to look into the Shakespeare mystery, the work of Peter Amundsen. And we'll also look into other aspects like ties to Sufism. And we'll also take a deeper look at the Freemasonry movement and links to Rosicrucianism. So stay tuned, people, and do come back to check that out.
Yeah.
All of our files are free and will remain free. If you like the show, you can show support by donating $1 to help with expenses. Just use the PayPal link on our website, YouTube channel, or Facebook page. Thanks.